That there is no shame in that. Are you kidding? All right, that changes my whole plan here. Okay, I'm going to start this.
I think that, Rachel and I were made the quote hosts for this thing. And I think that when people show up, only we can hear the big loud doorbell sound. Is that right, everybody? Have you been hearing a doorbell sound this whole time? You have been? Oh, so let's wait one more minute before we start.
That's fine.
Introducing, because that would be unfortunate. And then Erica is our introduceress.
I think Luke turned off the doorbell sound if we wanted to get started.
Oh, okay. Okay. So for those of you who are, there was a workshop this afternoon, and some of you were there and some of you weren't, but let me just first introduce Erica Bauer, who is one of our graduating, I always want to say graduating seniors, but who, and her work and the work of Amy Seymour, also on screen, were discussed with, real intensity and usefulness this afternoon. And Erica is going to introduce our evening's guest, Lia Purpura, who is coming to us from Baltimore, where apparently it's also raining. And I've already let her know, let Lia know that if the power were to go out and we were to disappear, it's not a mass walkout or anything. But let me remind everybody to have your sound off. And is there anything else? Nope, I think that's it. So Erica, will you take it away, please?
Yes. Okay, so Lia Purpura is a poet, writer, and educator. She's the writer in residence at the University of Maryland, where she teaches poetry and creative nonfiction workshops. She's also the she's the author of 4 collections of poetry, 4 collections of essays, and 1 collection of translations. Purpura's most recent work includes her collection of essays titled All the Fierce Tethers, and her most recent collection of poetry is It Shouldn't Have Been Beautiful. In her most recent collection of essays, she acts as expert witness of her surroundings as well as a fluent interpreter of her observations. Her essays unravel and circle around ideas, making associative leaps which lead her audience to entirely new spaces, where meaning is both shared and gained. When I began reading this collection, I came back to Natalie, my thesis advisor, and bombarded her with excitement because as a reader, I was swept away. But as a writer, I found myself starting over in an attempt to dissect how she had led me through so many ideas without me noticing I was being led. So whether it's through your Zoom emojis or you unmute yourself, please help me give a warm welcome to Lia Purpura.
Great. Thank you so much, Erica. That was beautiful. Thank you all for coming out, or maybe staying in. I guess that's what you did. And I did as well. So we're both being like bombarded with wild weather on either coast, and that brings us more closely together. in some way that I can kind of touch and feel and hear. So I appreciate that. I'm going to read short pieces tonight, and I'm going to start with one essay in from my new collection, or newest collection. It's not hot off the presses, but from All the Fierce Tethers, called Adventures in Beauty. But Adventures in Beauty also has another life as an artist book. So there are so many different forms of artists' books. They can take the form of erasure collections or collage books. This essay also appears this way. And I wrote it was a collage project, and it's published by C Double Press, and it's an amazing press. Mary Royfel publishes with them, and Lawrence Sutin. And this was originally a 1950, I don't know, 2 or something, kids geology book. And I sort of found it so earnest, and the drawings were so clear and of their time, that it sort of drew this particular essay into it, and then kind of asked to be collaged over. So it's hard to, I don't think I can show you too much of the book this way. Here's one. Here's just one form of the collage. So, you know, it's a sort of cutout bird and another cutout in its beak, and some of my writing at the bottom. It was one of the best times artistically and as a writer that I have ever had in my life. I wanted to quit everything and just make artist books for the rest of my born days. And it allowed me also to think about language paired with visual pieces, literal like pieces, in ways that really changed my writing. So that's a sort of plug for engaging engaging your language with other art forms, if possible. So there's one word that general folks might not be up on, and that is the word jesses. And it's a word from falconry. It's the little harness that is fitted to a falcon and when the falcon is sort of about to fly off, the jesses are taken off its legs. Okay, and that word happens towards the end of the essay. So this is Adventures in Beauty. Hang on. I just got these and I don't really know how to work them. Once a friend, reacting to a tickle on her arm, saw she had smacked a lacewing, green, filigreed, and sheer as a breath. "Oh, you're so beautiful, I'm sorry," she said before finishing it off, as if its beauty might have saved it. What then of stink bugs and worms, silverfish, earwigs, an awful shivery name, the armored and pincered, jiggly and larval, slick with ooze, sweating in sun, the uglies removed without hesitation. Or possums, those quiet, shy creatures as smart as dogs, who can't overcome their pointy ghost faces and needly teeth, whose bright black eyes are cold and beady, the same dark eyes that in dolphins signal the presence of soul. A beautiful thing makes alive air. Looking upon it fills the eye up, and as the eye rests on the graceful, or lush, the heart swells, the breath slows, and in beholding, one's strength is confirmed. A beautiful thing flatters us into care. The slug also catches the eye, reflecting sunlight like a prismy tear, which we meet with no desire at all, no urge to scoop up and tuck under a shady leaf, to make a dwelling in the evening air in which being there together is enough. Slugs, too, keep us back, but skinless, unshelled, like stuff meant to be washed from the body. Their softness is a contamination, an outward sign of an inward fragility, unnervingly tender, like liver or brains on display in the butcher's case. In motion, a slug is peristaltic, embarrassing. It can't rush away. It has nowhere to hide. Or let me try this. It's not the beautiful's need to be cared for, but its independence that beckons and holds us. The beautiful possesses an abundance of form, color, scent, gesture, and with such riches is sufficient unto itself. Looking on, gathering the radiance in, it's we who are fed on its plenty, and thus inessential, extraneous to it, like any discounted lover, we're moved, compelled even, to sidle up and be near. Or because, quote, beauty is the beginning of a terror we are just able to bear, the sidling up must be done with care. Beauty as proto, early stage, fresh, not yet an excess, not yet the sublime, those full forest gales, deep gorges, and dark, brooding, overhung moods. If one is moved to incline toward beauty, willing even to be wounded by it, that brief, oh, as in, oh, you're so beautiful, then the quick recoil at the sight of a slug is a kind of protection. A slug is already on the decline, a slippery clot, a leak threatening borders. It melts and sags. Confronted with the delicacy of a slug, how under the slightest nudge it will wince. Something deep in the body takes over and we veer away. Or if intent on hastening the end, we dissolve them with handfuls of salt. A beautiful, say, zinnia in bloom is alert and upright. There's spine in its comport, no hunching, no crawling along on its belly. Propped in a vase, a cut flower asserts the absolute present, intensifies it, makes of itself an extravagance. Easy to say, a day's beautiful. Sun, nothing cruel in the wind, a sky that shouts its color out, fingerings of breeze, exhilarance of scent. All the component parts are up front and lit. A gray sky has its brightness, though it doesn't impose. It's not so full of glare and assertion. Gray is the register of underseen things, of tinctures and compounds. It's not on the scale of beautiful ugly. It occupies instead a dimension like epics at the heart of a stone. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. Being all ye know on earth and all ye need to know is a comfort. An assertion, sliding between fixed points. Gray, though, makes you look harder. What else is there? Squint until you skid off the track where those creatures who live neither here nor there hide. Edge of a cliff, side of a highway, in gaps and passes. Transitional spots are neither safe nor contained. And there, In the regions where things unsettle, you might linger until the lace on a wing turns back to veins, till what looked like a simple head clarifies, and you see in its place a welter of eyes, angled just so in soft plain light, a light that does not desiccate. A slug might iridesce, its eyes incline toward your words and breath, its gaze be gently inquisitive. There would be no start or end to your sight. The jesses would slip from slug and lacewing, and in falling away their forms be released, the language of measurement break into pieces, and each moment of seeing be again its own shining grunt of creation. So that's the first one. There's here we go. I can at least show you that. There's the possum. You can see it close up there. It's sort of screeching and announcing the beginning of the book. I'm going to read two new pieces, and we'll see what our time is like after that. So this is a short piece that is included in the anthology I was just talking about, Letter to a Stranger. Subtitle is Essays to the Ones Who Haunt Us. And this is such an interesting premise for an anthology. And some of the titles are To the Man Who Saw Cobras Dance in Auroraville, India. To the Girl in the Tattoo Parlor by Michelle T., Dallas, Texas. So they're all placed throughout the country. To the First Responder After the Storm, New Orleans. And that one's by David Parker. So this premise that there are folks we barely know out there who have walked across the sort of screen of our lives, or touched us, or impressed us in some way, and are sort of forever lost to us, really calls into question for me what it means to know someone, right? What does it mean when we say we know someone? And the multiple, profoundly varied and complex ways there are of knowing people, another human. So we were asked to place these essays or emplace them. And since this one took place on a plane, or this moment, this essay, this encounter took place on a plane, I kind of had to guess that it was somewhere over the Cascades in Oregon. This is called To the Child on the Plane. I stood in the aisle, stretching as pretense, but really, it was to get a better look at you in action. I loved you instantly. It was your gestures, how you rubbed your freckly nose with the back of a hand, then pushed the long hair out of your face. No thought to smoothing or neatening. With legs tucked under, you loosened the seatbelt as far as possible. The way I still play with the letter of the law on planes. You were a little loud, but not whiny. Direct, but not demanding. Athletic, but not in a trained up way. It looked like you knew how to think with your body. You yielded none of your seat to your sister. You were older, 11 or 12, and indulgent with the bag of toys, except when your mother had to referee time with the joke book. When I was 12, I would have loved a friend like you. I spent my girlhood cajoling reluctance to hike through woods, ride straight down hills, and stay in the ocean past bluing. You'd have met me anywhere. We would have worn our jeans and t-shirt uniform. At that age, I hand lettered a T myself, a simple black marker on a cast off from my father that read, "The more I know of man, the more I love my dog," which worried my mother. People were often mean though, and I did so love my dog. Your mother's voice broke the spell. You and your sister were fighting over a snack, and your mother called out a boy's name, David. What an unexpectedly steep disappointment. You were a boy child. And so it followed, of course, the ease of movement and claiming of territory, of course, the confident voice and reluctance to prettify. All I'd recognized as free, bold, and girl dissolved and slipped out of reach. Oh, girl, the sensation was still present, but became again singular, mine to protect, not mirrored in another. Girl went inward and private, a way of being known best to animals and trees. Still, you sent me right back to age 12. I'd just gotten my period, and when I went back out to ride my bike, new pad in place, I realized with a shock so sharp it was physical, I'd have to carry a bag now. I could be ambushed by the need for supplies at any time, and I'd have to plan for proximity to bathrooms. In a panic, I thought I could just stuff one in my pocket like a tissue or a dollar and go. But no, too bulky. More to the point, we girls were meant to keep them out of sight. Hidden from whom? And how was discretion communicated? With the usual whispers, pantomimes, and codes. The gift of little zippered bags in pink, the most useless form of camouflage.
Oh.
Such early training in accepting but not naming boys as the central subject of my actions, soon to be the central subject of our collective fear, and yet in need of protection from the reality of our bodies. A backpack took care of my concerns. Hands free, I could ride easily and hike. I still carry one to this day. I got a good look at your sister too, before I went back to my aisle and seat. She seemed cool enough, but the usual sort of girl who made dolls talk and wore sparkly barrettes and bracelets. Nice, though not someone I'd have as a pal. You're the one I wondered about long after that flight. Maybe you were a girl en route to being a boy, or a boy who liked and would grow his girl self, or a long-haired kid refusing to take sides. Such are the possibilities available now, as they were not then. I'm grateful for them. All I know is you caught my eye, winged me back to a lightness, a power I held once so easily at the center of my body, a way of being I recognized immediately, a freedom that still presents as notable. So that one was, we were talking in workshop this afternoon. I don't know about so many things, but how strange moments often start essays, or strange, interesting, unforeseen moments are sort of packets of energy that keep the essay rolling, or serve as touch points, or excite us. And usually, if those are the moments that excite the writer, they'll be exciting for the reader as well. As soon as this, as the editor asked if I'd write for this anthology, and gave me the title and the premise, I was able to find my way back to that moment because it suddenly had a frame. Right? So I was really, really grateful for that assignment. So I will read, let's see. I think I'm going to read just 2 more short ones. Okay. I'm turning to birds now. Okay. This essay is the last essay in a series. It's in All the Fierce Tethers. And I did a series of essays on blood spots, which is a strange thing to be writing about, I realize. But once I started thinking about blood and blood spots and seeing them in different forms all over the city, on my campus, I had this mini project to fulfill. And so this is the last one in this series. And it comes after an essay on blood that I had sort of been looking for after a shooting close to my home. So this is a very different way of tracking blood. So this is just blood spots for CODA. The late August heat stoppers in tight after rain, no relief, but everything shines. Everything smells of fresh mud and worms. About 10 steps ahead of me, a low circling hawk dives into tall grass, lifts off with a mouse, and flies it up to a crook in a nearby white pine. It's so quiet, I can hear the bones snap, the beak click. I watch the red shoulders tense and release, hawk patience and neatness, the dipping in and picking so deft. Barest breeze ruffling under wing, breast curve white against the rough bark. When the bodies shift, wet needles let down their rain. On my way back, the hawk's already flown. In the empty space, sun falls on the spot where I know the blood is. Someone climbing this tree on a bright day in fall wouldn't notice a thing. The red long gone to shadow or moss, persistent damp, mottled bark. But there it was, the ease, the dive, so precise, no grazing or clipping. The lifting as one, not a thing murked, no slang for the killing. The piercing and tearing was urgent and bloody, and no proper animal would think to note this. There was no anger or waste or meanness. So finally, this is one of the newest things I've written. It has not been easy writing during COVID. I don't know how you all are feeling, but it's not been easy for me. We can talk about that. So this is called Just Sparrows, and it's coming out in the Washington Square Review sometime. Just sparrows. Just. That weird diminishment. The common, the daily, not much to see here. Though the vast lives of the smallest occupy us, harrow the blood, corner the breath, balance and tend the ongoing systems. Early this morning, a thin pink thyme, tender, not yet yellowed up, the sparrows were rustling through the fur out front. In the nest of my hands would fit 2 or 3 birds, and that's all it took. A plain brown handful to set the tree on, no, not fire, set it on saying. The tree went on saying, chipping, seed cracking, sparrowed up with talk and intention, a body in need of sparrowing, the way one needs to stretch after being too long in one spot, after being too long one thing. A breeze came and everything shifted, the light, my hair. Branches changed their dark parts for wings. House sparrow, percher, quick sipper from bark troughs of black rain. Passerine domesticus, the moving and settled, the settled but briefly, like any of us, with more than a singular way to be known. This morning, green needed a way of inflecting. Chose sparrow. What happened was like a glass, steady filling. More landed, gathered, kept on with their being. I entered the rising, anyone could, and just at the top, at the lip, time held. It didn't still or mark or pass, but hovered, we all did, in the near brimming. At the swell, it fattened, then overran, poured down and sang, and sang, and sang. Then they flew. The sparrows lifted all together, ripened, loosened, scattered like seeds. A moment not lessened by its passing, its brief stay or sudden flight. The moment fleshed, then flashed into air. Sparrows pulled me up to a branch, landed me in a fray of green. By me, I mean those drops of iridescing sap in patches dried like salt or rime, grubs in holes, flicker dug, black moss, wet bark, needles in breeze, all fed on light, air, water, the bodies of others, all sparrow-led or touched or seen. Thank you. So are we having some questions? Is that what's, did you want
Yes,
to do
please.
questions and answers and responses? So I'm open if there's anything you'd like to know or talk about or say.
I actually have one that's been on my mind since this afternoon's workshop, but is brought up again by the things you read. I've been working all year with a couple of different people who, you always sort of find out when you're really concentrating on your work, what's your thing that you're always going to either miss or struggle with or whatever. And a couple of different people I've been working with have been repeatedly trying to figure out endings, and sometimes it's a matter of what do I write more of to come to a close, and sometimes it's how do I recognize that I already closed, and I'm wondering if so much of your lyric prose ends the way on one of those startling moments, the way so many lyric poems do. Can you talk a little bit about recognizing an ending or achieving an ending that you can't find, or anything like that?
That's one of those eternal questions, isn't it? Yeah, that really, really is. And it's a hard one to address. So I started my writing life as a poet, and now I write both poems and essays simultaneously. And so I know working with poems and feeling a certain kind of ending and studying really as a reader, not as a scholar, but as a reader studying the music of endings, the weight of endings, trying to find names for endings. Like, is this an effervescent ending that does that? Is this an ending that lands on a moral? Is this an ending that creates an ambiguity, right? That really helped me think very clearly about, the very different kinds of energies that are possible for endings. So I think if you try in your own language, if a writer tries in their own language to name for themselves what's going on at an ending, right? That makes it more possible to work with it. Wow, this is a really hard stop ending. And it creates, a kind of moral certainty. Is that what I want? This ending just sort of dissolves in air in a way that's interesting. Wow, it creates a sense of possibility. Is that what I want? And so to both sort of name what you see happening, at your ending, and then to ask, is that the best ending? To is that the best ending to land on? Does it throw the reader back into the essay? Is that what you want? Or does it really, lead far out, of the essay? So I'm just throwing out some ideas about, how to name and then how to reflect on what an ending might be. And I think the other thing I'd say too is read the piece aloud. Read it aloud, right? Don't just like work on the page. Read it so that the end is in the air and in your ear. And so you're not constantly intellectualizing, about it. If you feel a stop that's like a kind of, foot on the brake, you'll hear it when you're reading aloud, right? And then of course you ask yourself, is that what I want? But to get it out in the air and in the ear teaches you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Aaron is asking, during the workshop, you mentioned knowing when to do research and knowing how research will impact your writing. Can you talk more about that? How do you know whether research will hinder your progress? Or when it's appropriate? If research is required, how do you know when it's time to stop searching and write? Well, that's a really good point right there. You can absolutely over research yourself, meaning it's a very effective tool of procrastination, isn't it? Right? People writing their PhDs apparently have this problem, right? They research forever and ever and ever. I don't have a PhD, thank God. But, there's this endless, like, just motion of researching and gathering and piling up information and then, trying to figure out how to use it. For me, when I'm working, I usually hit a kind of wall, and it's a wall of ignorance, and it has a very particular feeling and flavor, and I can't go on any further because I don't know anything past a certain point. I'm writing, I'm like, how does that bird do that? So I usually write myself into a problem or write myself into a particular form of ignorance. And I can't, I'm not making this stuff up, right? This is an essay. I'm not writing fiction or speculative fiction. So I need to figure out, you know, what the actual, you know, next fact is all about. What I do with it is very different, you know, is my own. But I often find myself, so I was thinking about roads, okay, in one essay. And I was working with this image of the land being capped and suffocating under, you know, roads, the creation of, you know, the modern road. And it was a really visceral feeling of land just being suffocated. And I wrote it, but it felt a little bit floaty. And I thought, well, I really don't even know how roads are made. What does a road even look like? Exactly how suffocated is the earth, the ground, you know, what I would call, you know, soil, ground, earth. And so I looked up, you know, I had to do some research on how roads were made. And in fact, they are layered up, you know, with all kinds of material, for all kinds of purposes. One, of course, would be drainage. Another would be balance. Another would be, you know, weight bearing. And so, you know, the land was even more capped and stifled than I had known. But I had kind of initially imagined my way into that. You know, understanding like when you really literally can't go on any further, and then, you know, researching that is one way to do it. And of course, you can start with the urge to research, you know, like, wow, you know, there's that dark cloud. What kind of cloud is that again? I can't remember my clouds. Or, you know, the wind is super intense right now. What kind of wind is that? And then you start, you know, looking up wind scales, and you're like, wow, there's a wind scale, the Beaufort chart, I think it is. And, you know, who knows what grows from that kind of research. So, you know, it could be an upfront kind of impulse or something you write yourself into. That's all really basic, I think. And knowing how your research will impact your writing, well, you know, that can, as you probably know, you know, the more you start researching, the more possibilities there are for, you know, veering down paths you absolutely had not foreseen, which is one of the great joys of writing, right? To be able to let go of your initial impulse and follow something else that's more interesting. So research has the capacity to teach you to be really profoundly Zen-like about your practice, right? You can bump into something and realize, whoa, I'm really kind of interested in what I started with, but I'm really interested in something else now. And will you be the person who holds on to her initial impulse? Or will you be the person who veers off wildly into some new and unexplored territory? You'll see. Did that answer that question, do you think? If there's something more specific that you wanted to know, you can tell me. Good. Okay. Is that Jennifer? Is that a hand waving around there? Yeah. Jill.
Yes. Jill.
Yeah.
Hi. I have a question. It's kind of a lot. Let's see. So I've noticed you write about nature a lot, or nature plays a big part in your work. And I'm curious, one, like what compels that for you, your relationship to that, but also do you like start with a natural object or like a bird or a flower, or do you start more with like an emotion or a behavior that you're curious about exploring and then that comes to mind? Or I'm just curious. I write a lot about nature too, and I'm trying to find words to explain what I'm doing. I'm curious what you're doing.
You're trying to find words to explain what you're doing to, who are you explaining this to?
to myself
Oh,
or just to understand
I
my
see.
process.
I see.
And maybe, I guess,
I
to
understand.
expand my process to,
I see. Yeah. Yep. So I am of nature, I can hardly even say the N word, that nature word, because I feel no division really between, my sort of self and the living other than human world. And so, in being open to that, I'm open to a lot of really hard and complicated emotions, and I feel very porous pretty much all the time, and have to think about what it means to write about the other than human world, the green world, the natural world, at a moment when we are recognizing how profoundly ruined it is, and how much our systems are set up to perpetuate that ruin. I'm talking about climate, which is just kind of a catchword for everything that's happening. And so for me as well, I'm trying to figure out what that means and what I'm doing, and how I can find, any language at all for the kinds of relationships that I feel with the natural world and as part of the natural world, and how to write as someone who's keenly aware of much loss that's going on as well. Mm-hmm. So it's an enormous I feel it as an enormous task, and to make words for that for everything I've just noted, and so that feels like the challenge of my writing life, the challenge of my life as well. So I meet you in your, trying to figure in your, I guess, kind of quest to find language for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's it. I'm not seeing anything else, but I might be missing something. Am I missing anything, Natalie? Or anyone?
Okay, so I already had my share of question, but what you just got done talking about was essentially beginnings, and I asked you about endings. And another thing that comes up, and this is more often at the undergraduate teaching level, but it's something that occasionally we still end up referring to at the graduate level, the idea of what's a cliche, and when when, how do I say this? How do I phrase this? I think that and it might be my emphasis as a teacher on, freshness and originality that sometimes ends up constipating people and making them feel like, if I have an idea for a beginning, if I'm responding to something that that I really notice and feel like maybe there's art in it, I'm going to start a poem or an essay or something. I've noticed more and more, and I don't know if it's true that I've noticed it more during COVID or if I'm just more aware of it, but I see people kind of pre-editing their impulses to say, well, I'm having a strong feeling, but it's about motherhood. And that's just, that's one of those not okay subjects. Or I'm having a real urge, but it's because I was just bereaved, and I'm not even going to try to write anything original about that. So this is kind of my question as, another writer who's talking to writers who I see pre-editing themselves, I guess is the term. Earlier this afternoon when you talked about, do you ever, you sort of gave the advice, sometimes just let yourself go, overwrite, don't hold back. Nobody has to see your first draft. Once you've got that draft, if we can convince everybody to just not self-censor first, what's your next step? So if I've said, okay, it's about motherhood, and I'm just going to write the motherhood essay, as cliche as it might be, how do you then interrogate that draft to without shutting it down, because you're going to find, if you overwrite like that, you're going to find, oh yeah, I kind of went in some pretty expected motherhood directions. So what's your sort of second step then?
Wow, so much in there. We did talk in workshop about unhooking the expressive, creative, immediate drafting self from the editorial self, because those two can't be working simultaneously. So there's that. The second step is such a good way to put it. And the first thing that came to mind really as a response was, drafts are places where we allow ourselves to grow up. Right. And so I think there's some trust in, or one could put trust in, let me start that over. You can kind of be assured that you'll write some cliched shit, and over the course of a couple of drafts, we'll come to see that is a commonly held thought, or that's territory that has probably been gone over before, and you'll sort of grow yourself up, I think, in draft after draft after draft, because you're engaged in the act of naturally trying to deepen your thought, right? And so maybe if we think about drafts as expressions of time and places where, we allow ourselves to grow up, we might be less critical of those cliches. I think the pre-editing impulse, is that what you said? To pre-edit yourself is stoked by the forces of social media in very profound ways. And if you've got a sort of inflow of, if you're reading like little bits of essays, if your feed is like feeds are like mostly writer oriented, right? You start seeing this, you start seeing subjects, right? And you're not even really reading deeply. You just see subject after subject after subject after subject. And you're not really taking in anything very deeply. And then you start applying that to your own thoughts and your own impulses. in your own work. And so you have an idea and you let it go. You have an idea and you let it go. You have an idea, you view it, judge it, let it go. Oh God, somebody else did it, And so you're taught to sift through for the new thing over and over and over again. And so that's a whole other subject. That's like a whole issue, I think, and it's enormous, and it has to do with attention and ways that we are training our attention by way of social media. So that's another kind of answer, but is that
very nice? Very nice. Thanks.
Yeah. Sean mentioned earlier a bit about sort of writing until you're stuck and having to figure a way through a problem along that process. This is something I deal with quite regularly. Sometimes I feel I just have to walk away from a piece. Yes. But I also don't want to step away from a piece for too long either. Yes. Your talk about research seemed to be that researching would possibly be a course of action in doing that. But I was curious if you have any other go-to methods for getting through those moments to move along with the piece. So, yes, changing the way in which you interact with a piece. And I think I mentioned this in the workshop. So for maybe those of you who weren't there, I'll just emphasize working in different places is an incredible help to moving, a piece along, stepping away from it, but not for too long. Absolutely. Because you don't have to go through, getting intimate with this piece again and saying like, hi, remember us? We were really, really close. We loved each other once and we were like that. And now we have to just sit down and have coffee. And that's what it can feel like if you step away for too long. But if you're like right up in its face all the time, like you just really don't want to be around each other for a while. So there's a kind of sweet spot, right? Where you're really wanting to get back to this thing because you've been away for enough time. So you kind of have to like find that particular spot. And then I think I would say also just reading, absolutely reading and absorbing others' syntaxes, others' dictions, not addictions, but others' dictions, and taking notes on what you're reading, writing out words, stealing authors' words that you love and, keeping a list or writing out sentences that you think are beautiful. Those are ways of exercising the musculature, but not necessarily exercising it on your own work, right? So keeping your like self limber by reading and taking notes and holding words and copying sentences. It sort of keeps the blood flowing and the muscles working, but it's not, you're not directly staring your own work down all the time. So hope that helps with that. So good.
Lia, I have just a question. Earlier in workshop, you talked about like making friends with your librarian.
Yes.
I love that. My mom's a librarian, so I can resonate with that. But I just wondered for you, like, what kind of people are in your world? You had talked about going to I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was where you had met different artists. And I wondered if you had some words or advice for us about like, who can we connect with, or who could we reach out to? Or I think it's so typical. I mean, writers are typically introverts, so I like my cat. she's great.
Yeah.
If you had some encouragement or some advice for us about the kinds of people we might want to reach out to or touch base with, whether it's just for our writing or just even for life. Yeah.
So some of that might be an attitudinal question. So I don't know where I just read this thing. Somebody was talking about his mother, and said, other mothers would, the kid would come home from school and they would say, like, how did you do in school, or how was your test? And my mother never said that. She always said, did you ask a good question today? And I thought that is so great, because that's really everything. I have become kind of later in life a person who talks to everybody about everything. I did not used to be this person. I'm still kind of introverted in the sense that I can only take so much socializing. Like I saturate, way sooner than, other people. But I will talk to anybody about anything, cashiers. I have serious like friendships with 3 cashiers at the grocery store. And we have our things that we talk about. I think just a sense of in lieu of finding like incredibly interesting pockets of people, to talk to, like metal workers or something, or fiber artists, just to take even the smallest opportunities to ask people questions. Everything from, their day to something about their work, how their day was to, how do they do the thing they do? And that's a kind of daily way to put that into practice. I was talking about being the writer in residence at the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts, which is like one of the most astonishing craft schools in the country. So if you have occasion to somehow talk to folks whose work is wildly different. Like when I go to the doctor now, I'm more interested in like doctoring than, the fact that I came in with, an earache or something. So that might help. Also getting involved with groups, also something I never did. I just was never a joiner ever. But I guess I am now. I do all kinds of group stuff. I'm part of like the neighborhood greening committee and get to talk to all kinds of people there. So, kind of stepping out in that, in small ways, in small ways. I never thought I would be telling anybody any of this, just because I never expected to be this person.
The essayist Jim Heinen, long time ago, I remember him telling a story about how he had a septic tank pumper guy.
Yes.
And the guy crawled down in his sewer tank and was, fixing whatever it was. And as the guy's coming, back up, he says, the septic tank pumper said, "What do you do for a living?" And Jim said, "I'm a writer." And the guy said, "Oh my gosh, I'd hate that job." It led to a marvelous conversation about what that guy's job was,
That's spectacular. Well, Jim is one of the best conversationalists ever. I taught with him for years at our MFA program. He's just great. So yes, definitely talk to your plumber. It's great. So is there anything else? Any last words? Any last words, Natalie?
You've certainly gone above and beyond your staying out of bed
I'm
commitment.
good.
Thank
good.
you for coming. This is just such a treat.
Thank you for hosting me. It's been great, really.
Those of you who are in the lyric essay class, I will see you Monday and we'll have an awful lot to talk about now. Not that we don't never have anything to talk about, but you know, prepare to stay late.
That's great. Well,
And-
thank you.
And I have, Leah, I have sent you contact information for the 2 people whose work you did today.
I got that. I'll send that out tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, great. And does anybody have any last things? Can we do jazz hands?
Thank you.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
good night.
Have a
Rest
good
up.
night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good to see you all.